The great council hall of Zyrath Prime was a place where silence could crush a man's courage. Built from black stone older than recorded time, it was the seat of judgment for the entire Galactic Coalition, an arena where wars could begin or end with a single word. Today, that silence was heavier than ever. Every race in the Coalition had sent a delegate. Tall avian scholars of the Vera fluttered their metallic feathers. The cold-eyed reptilians of the Draxer coiled their tails around their thrones. Even the crystalline seraphim, creatures made of living glass, dimmed their inner light, as though afraid to shine too brightly in this tense moment. At the center of the hall stood three small beings, predator cubs. Their fur was dark silver, streaked with the blue markings of their kind. Sharp claws flexed unconsciously. Golden eyes glowed faintly under the council lights. They looked young, no more than children, but every species present knew what they were. Wraithkind, the Destroyers. The nightmare race that once hunted entire planets for sport. They were built for killing, their strength unmatched, their instincts sharpened by millions of years of evolution. Even their young could tear a grown soldier apart. And yet, they were silent. No growls, no defiance, only stillness. Behind them stood a single human, Commander Ethan Cross. He wore no armor, no weapons, just a faded Earth Fleet jacket scarred with burns and dust from a dozen worlds. His face was lined but calm. He stood between the cubs and the council like a wall of quiet defiance. The High Speaker rose from her crystal chair, her voice echoing through the chamber like thunder. Commander Ethan Cross of Earth, you are brought before this council under charge of harboring and protecting enemies of the galaxy. These creatures are of the predator race, responsible for the Wraith massacre. You were ordered to destroy all survivors, yet here you stand, defending them. Ethan did not answer. He simply looked at the three cubs sitting near his boots. The smallest one trembled, hiding its face against his leg. Whispers rippled through the hall. He tamed them? No, impossible. Humans are weak prey. They cannot tame predators. The High Speaker's eyes glimmered. Speak, human. Why do they obey you? Ethan's voice was low, steady. Because I didn't make them obey. They chose to. A murmur rose among the council members. The sound was like the growl of an approaching storm. The Draxor representative slammed his scaled fist on the table. Lies, the Wraith know no loyalty. They know hunger, rage, and blood. They slaughtered my people without mercy. Ethan's eyes met his. I saw that war. I fought in it. I lost people too. The reptilian hissed. Then you should have finished the job. The human shook his head. They were children, just children hiding under the wreckage of a burning den. You would have done the same if you had found your own hatchlings there. A sharp silence cut through the air. The High Speaker leaned forward. And yet, Commander, you call them children, not beasts. Do you forget what their kind did? Entire fleets torn apart, cities devoured. I haven't forgotten, Ethan said softly. But they're not their kind anymore. Not after what they've seen. The smallest cub whimpered. Instinctively, Ethan knelt, resting a hand on its shoulder. The child pressed closer, its claws retracting as it leaned against his arm. The simple motion, gentle, trusting, sent a wave of disbelief through the audience. Several delegates recoiled as if struck. The Vera scholar whispered, "Look at their eyes." They're calm. The crystalline seraphim flickered uncertainly. Predators do not act calm in fear. This is something else. The Draxor delegate spat. This is trickery. Enough, said the High Speaker. The council will observe. Commander Cross, step back. Ethan obeyed, slowly retreating until he stood just behind the cubs. The council lights brightened. A machine unfolded from the floor. A glowing sphere known as the Mind Probe, capable of reading surface thoughts and emotions. Scan them, ordered the speaker. A beam of soft light swept over the cubs. Their ears flattened, but they did not move. Data flowed through the sphere in brilliant lines of color. Red for aggression, blue for fear, green for empathy. At first, the colors were chaos. Then something extraordinary happened. The red faded. The blue dimmed. Green filled the projection. The seraphim gasped, their bodies flickering bright in astonishment. Impossible. That color represents empathy. Understanding. The Vera whispered, "Predators cannot feel empathy." "They can now," Ethan murmured. The High Speaker narrowed her eyes. "Explain." Ethan exhaled slowly as if remembering something far away. "When I found them, their den was burning. Their parents were gone. They were starving, half mad. They tried to attack me. I didn't fight back. I gave them food. I talked to them. I stayed. He looked at the council. They didn't trust me at first. It took days before one of them stopped growling long enough to eat. But when the storms came, we hid together. I kept the fire burning. I told them stories about my home, about Earth, and about humans. The chamber was silent. I don't know when it changed, Ethan continued. But one night, the youngest brought me a piece of fruit it had stolen from a tree. It placed it beside me. I think it was trying to feed me. He smiled faintly. That was the night they stopped seeing me as prey. The seraphim flickered softly. So they learned kindness. They learned what they saw, Ethan said. Maybe we all do. The high speaker tapped her staff, echoing through the marble floor. Enough sentiment. You disobeyed direct orders. You sheltered the enemy. That alone warrants imprisonment. Ethan looked up at the council, his voice quiet but firm. If protecting children is a crime, then I'll accept the sentence. Before the speaker could reply, the smallest cub, barely half Ethan's height, stepped forward. It raised its head, bearing small but sharp teeth. Every guard aimed their weapons instantly, but instead of attacking, the cub made a sound, soft, almost human. It said, "No, hurt, Ethan." The entire chamber froze. The cub spoke. For thousands of years, the Wraith had no recorded history of speech in the human tongue, no sign of mimicry, no language learning, and yet here it was, broken but real. Ethan crouched beside it, placing a hand on its head. "It's okay, little one." The high speaker's voice cracked. "Did it just speak? For you?" Ethan didn't answer. He didn't have to. The truth was standing in front of everyone. The cubs turned toward the council, 3 pairs of golden eyes staring down the galaxy's mightiest leaders. No growling, no violence, just calm, steady awareness. They sat quietly beside Ethan. That sight, 3 predators sitting in obedience beside a human, sent shivers through every being in the hall. The high speaker whispered, "Why do they sit? What have you done to them?" Ethan looked at her with tired eyes. Nothing. Maybe for the first time they just trust someone. The Draxor delegate rose furious. "You have created monsters that pretend to be tame. They must be destroyed before they breed." "Breed?" Ethan said sharply. "They're children. You want to execute them because they remind you of your fear." The reptilian slammed his tail. "Fear is what keeps us alive." "No," Ethan said, his voice steady. "Fear is what keeps you from living." The council erupted into noise. Voices overlapped, accusations, demands, panic. The cubs flinched and pressed closer to Ethan, their ears flat from the chaos. "Quiet," shouted the high speaker. The hall fell still again. She turned her gaze toward Ethan. "Commander Cross, you claim to have changed them through compassion. Yet compassion cannot erase instinct." "Maybe not," Ethan said, "but it can teach them choice." He looked down at the cubs, then back at the council. "If they choose peace even once, isn't that proof that change is possible?" The speaker said nothing. The counselors whispered among themselves, unsure. Then, without warning, the doors burst open. A messenger ran in, breathless. "High speaker, there's a problem. One of the containment guards tried to harm the human." Before he could finish, the cubs turned toward the sound. Their eyes flared gold, and in an instant they were on their feet, ready to defend. Ethan held up his hand. "Sit." The cubs froze, then obeyed. The silence that followed was deafening. The council had witnessed it. Control without violence, command without fear. Something far beyond training or technology. The high speaker's expression softened for the first time. "You told them to sit, and they obeyed." Ethan nodded. "They listen when they feel safe." The speaker lowered her staff slowly. "Perhaps safety is rarer than we thought." She looked at the council. "The trial will continue at dawn. Until then, the human and the cubs are to remain under observation. No harm is to come to them." Guards approached, hesitant but respectful now. Ethan stood, placing a hand on each cub's shoulder. "It's all right," he said quietly. "They just don't understand yet." As they were led from the hall, the delegates whispered behind them, some in awe, others in fear. The seraphim delegate murmured, "If he truly tamed them through kindness, what else could humans teach?" The Draxor hissed back, "Or what else could they corrupt?" And above them all, the high speaker stared at the empty center of the chamber where the cubs had sat. For centuries, the galaxy believed that predators could never be tamed. That instinct ruled all life. But today, something changed. For the first time in the history of the Coalition, the universe had seen predators sit quietly beside a human, and no one understood why. Long before the council chamber filled with fear and whispers, before the cub sat quietly at a human's side, there had been nothing but smoke, rain, and death. It began on a forgotten world, Wraith 9, a planet of endless jungles and black storms, where lightning split the sky like broken glass and the air smelled of metal and rot. It was the place the galaxy had left to die after the war, a world haunted by ghosts of the predator race. Commander Ethan Cross never meant to land there. His ship, the Horizon, was shot down during a border skirmish. He woke up amid wreckage and blood, his crew gone, his communicator shattered. For days he walked alone through the dripping forests, hunted by things he could not name. Every sound was danger. Every shadow could have teeth. He had been trained to survive. He had not been trained for what he found. The encounter on the fourth night, while scavenging for food near a stream, Ethan heard a low growl. He froze. The sound was wrong. Not deep like an adult predator, but trembling, frightened. When he turned, he saw them. 3 small figures crouched in the mud. Their fur was soaked, their tiny fangs glinting under the lightning. Their eyes, gold, bright, desperate, met his wraith cubs. The last thing any human should ever face alone. Ethan reached for his pistol. Then he stopped. They weren't attacking. They were shaking. One cub whimpered, a thin, broken sound that pierced through his fear. The smallest one clutched a bone. The remains of its mother, perhaps. The eldest bared its teeth, shielding the others. They were hungry, terrified, and lost. Ethan lowered his weapon. He remembered his own daughter, gone years ago when the war reached Earth's outer colonies. She had been 6. He had seen that same look in her eyes during the bombing. He took a slow step forward and placed a ration pack on the ground. "Eat," he whispered, knowing they wouldn't understand. The cubs didn't move. The eldest growled, warning him away. He turned and walked back to his small campfire, leaving the food behind. That night, the rain poured harder. Thunder shook the ground. Ethan didn't sleep. He just sat near the fire, staring into the flames, wondering if he was a fool for showing mercy. By dawn, the ration pack was gone. The days of fire and hunger. The next days were a blur of survival. Ethan hunted for insects, built traps, and fought off scavengers that moved in packs. He kept the fire burning, though fuel was scarce. He spoke aloud sometimes, not to anyone, just to keep his sanity. But he was never truly alone. He began to notice footprints around his camp, small, clawed ones. Sometimes his food disappeared. Once he woke to find a cub watching him from behind a fallen log. It ran the moment he moved, still he kept leaving food. Still they kept coming back. Then came the storm. A monstrous cyclone ripped through the jungle like a god's rage. Ethan's shelter collapsed, his supplies scattered. He grabbed what he could and crawled into the wreck of an old escape pod for safety. He wasn't alone. 3 wet, trembling shapes huddled in the corner. The cubs. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Predator and prey trapped in the same cage. The wind screamed outside. Lightning flashed, painting their faces in white light. Ethan could have pushed them out. He could have drawn his gun. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a heat pack. He cracked it open, letting its warmth spread through the small pod. He placed it between them. The cubs sniffed. One crept closer, then another. Finally, the smallest and the one with the torn ear crawled right up to him and sat against his arm. The eldest growled again but didn't attack. Hours passed. The storm roared and then finally died. When the light returned, the cubs were asleep, pressed against the human who should have been their enemy. The choice. From that day on, they followed him. At first from a distance, then closer, then beside him. He shared his food, his warmth, his silence. When he built traps, they watched. When he fished, they tried to mimic his movements with clumsy claws. He didn't name them, not yet. But in his mind, he began to think of them as the eldest, the middle one, and the little one. Each had a personality. The eldest was cautious, always alert. The middle one was curious, often poking its nose where it shouldn't. And the smallest was gentle, too gentle for a creature born to kill. One evening, he cut his hand while fixing a broken knife. The scent of blood filled the air. He tensed, expecting the cub's instincts to awaken, but instead the smallest one made a soft noise and licked the wound. Ethan froze. He could feel its tiny heartbeat against his wrist. Fast, trembling, alive. That was the moment he understood something strange. They weren't only learning from him. They were learning about him. The predators were studying a human's kindness like it was an alien concept, and somehow, they liked it. The night of the flames weeks passed. Ethan built a larger shelter. The cubs brought him fruits and bones as gifts. They even learned to fetch wood, dragging small branches to the campfire. It wasn't much, but it meant something. Then came the fire. A rogue lightning strike ignited the forest. Flames spread fast, devouring everything. The cubs panicked, trapped by walls of smoke. Ethan grabbed them one by one and ran through the chaos, coughing, stumbling, shielding them with his jacket. The eldest resisted, growling in fear. Ethan shouted, "Come on, move!" But his voice was drowned by thunder. He turned back for the last cub and the smallest, and saw it stuck under a fallen branch, crying. Without thinking, he threw himself into the flames, lifting the burning wood with his bare hands. Pain tore through him, but he didn't stop. He pulled the cub free and wrapped it in his arms. When the storm finally ended, the jungle was a wasteland of ash. Ethan collapsed near the river, smoke rising from his scorched jacket. The cubs circled him, making strange, soft sounds. The eldest, once proud and untouchable, lay its head against his chest. For the first time in its life, a predator bowed. The rescue a week later, a rescue ship from Earth's outer patrols detected the wreck signal. They found Ethan half-conscious beside 3 predator cubs sitting guard around him. When the soldiers tried to approach, the cubs snarled, ready to attack. Only when Ethan raised his hand and said softly, "It's okay," did they calm. The soldiers couldn't believe what they saw. One whispered, "They obey him." Another muttered, "That's not possible." When they lifted Ethan onto the stretcher, the smallest cub refused to move. It clung to his arm, whining. Ethan, weak but awake, said just 2 words, "Let them come." The rescue team hesitated, but orders were orders. They brought the cubs aboard. In the medical bay, while Ethan slept, the cubs sat quietly beside his bed. No growls, no attacks, just waiting. When the captain entered, one of them growled softly, a warning. But as soon as Ethan stirred, they relaxed again. The doctor whispered, "They act like they understand him." Maybe they did. The journey to Judgment news spread fast across the galaxy. A human soldier had returned from the predator world, alive, with living cubs at his side. To some, it was a miracle. To others, it was a threat. Scientists demanded to study the cubs. The military wanted them destroyed. The Galactic Council called for a trial, a hearing to decide the fate of the creatures and the man who had saved them. Ethan tried to explain, but no one wanted to listen. "They're not killers anymore," he said. "They're learning." The generals laughed. "They'll tear your throat out the moment you turn your back." Ethan only smiled faintly. "Then I guess I'll keep facing them." When the ship finally reached Zyrath Prime, thousands gathered outside the council hall. Reporters, diplomats, soldiers, all waiting to see the monsters that a human claimed had learned compassion. As they stepped down the ramp, the crowd gasped. The cubs didn't snarl. They didn't roar. They walked beside Ethan, heads low, eyes calm. When someone threw a piece of metal at them, Ethan stopped. The smallest cub picked it up, sniffed it, and dropped it gently at his feet. Not one growl, not one sign of anger. Somewhere in the crowd, a child whispered, "They look sad." The question inside the council hall. Ethan stood before the galaxy's greatest minds, all ready to tear his story apart. "How did you do it?" one asked. "What control method did you use?" said another. "What drugs, what implants, what sorcery?" Ethan looked at the cubs sitting beside him. The eldest glanced up, meeting his eyes. And for a heartbeat, it felt like understanding. "I didn't use control," Ethan said quietly. "I used patience." The hall buzzed with disbelief. "That's impossible." He smiled faintly. "So was peace, once." The smallest cub leaned against his boot. The crowd fell silent. That was how it began. Not with science, not with force, but with a single act of mercy on a dying world. And though no one could explain it, everyone could feel it. Something ancient and unchangeable had cracked open. The laws of nature had been defied, and the universe itself was watching to see what would happen next. For the first time in galactic history, predators had chosen to trust a human, and humanity, in the form of one quiet soldier, had dared to trust them back. The news of the human and the predator cubs spread across the stars like wildfire. Some called it a miracle, some called it a trick. But to the Galactic Council, it was a threat unlike any weapon. The great chamber of Xyrath Prime was filled again. Holoscreens flashed the image of Ethan Cross and the three young Wraith sitting calmly beside him. Every council member had watched the recording dozens of times, and still, no one could explain it. Predators did not obey prey. That was nature, that was law, and yet here was a human, breaking both. The meeting of fear. The High Speaker began the session with a single phrase that shook the room. Gentle beings of the Council, what we are witnessing may not be evolution. It may be contamination. The word hung in the air. Contamination. The Draxer representative slammed his clawed hand on the table. They are killers. Every species here lost someone to the Wraith. If those cubs are alive, then so is the danger. The Seraphim ambassador glimmered with shifting light. And yet the readings show empathy within them. True emotional change. The reptilian hissed. Empathy is camouflage. They are mimicking human behavior to deceive us. The hall erupted with noise. Voices clashed like thunder. Fear smelled like metal in the air. The High Speaker raised her crystal staff. Silence. The human has been summoned again for questioning. Let the galaxy see for itself if his story holds truth. Ethan returns when the doors opened. Ethan Cross walked in with the three cubs close behind. He no longer wore his uniform jacket. It had been burned and torn beyond repair. Instead, he wore plain gray clothes, his expression steady, almost peaceful. The cubs followed him in a perfect line, their golden eyes alert, but calm. The youngest clutched a small object in its claws, a smooth stone Ethan had given it during the voyage. A comfort token, a reminder that not everything needed to be sharp to be strong. Every gaze in the hall followed their steps. Predators walking among prey, peacefully. Ethan stopped before the High Speaker. You called for me. We did, she said. And you will answer truthfully. How did you control them? I don't control them, Ethan said quietly. I don't think anyone could. Then why do they follow you? The Draxor delegate growled. Ethan looked down at the cubs. Because they trust me. The council burst into murmurs again. Words like brainwashing, manipulation, and psychological infection filled the air. The test enough, said the High Speaker. We will test your claim. She motioned toward the guards. 3 armed soldiers stepped forward, each carrying an energy staff. The cubs tensed, growling low. Ethan raised a hand slightly and they stopped. These soldiers will provoke them, the speaker said coldly. If your words are true, they will not attack. Ethan's jaw tightened. They're still children. They are predators, she corrected. Begin. One guard stepped closer. He tapped the metal floor with his staff, the sound echoing like a drumbeat. Another circled behind them. The eldest cub's fur bristled, its claws twitching. The youngest whimpered, pressing closer to Ethan's leg. The guard raised his voice, mocking, cruel. Look at them, pretending to be tame. He jabbed the staff toward the cubs. The eldest growled, a sound like thunder. The crowd gasped. Ethan knelt beside them. Hey, he said softly. Look at me, not them. The cubs turned toward him. His voice was calm, almost gentle. Remember what I told you. You don't have to fight everything that scares you. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the eldest lowered its head and sat. The others followed. The guard froze. The council chamber fell utterly silent. Ethan stood again. You see? They can choose peace, the Draxor delegate hissed. Peace is weakness. Ethan turned to him. Then maybe it's time someone taught strength another meaning. The whisper of plots after the session. While Ethan and the cubs were escorted back to the observation quarters, whispers filled the council corridors. This cannot be allowed, said the Draxor general. If the predators truly learn from humans, what stops them from learning war again? They are weapons waiting to be turned. Behind closed doors, an alliance formed. A group of leaders who saw Ethan's bond not as hope, but as danger. They called themselves the Preservation Bloc. Their mission, to erase the humans' experiment before it spread. They began planning that very night. The quiet moments. Inside the observation chamber, Ethan sat on the floor with the cubs around him. The room was bright, sterile, filled with the hum of hidden cameras. He spoke quietly as if talking to children. "You did good today." The smallest one tilted its head. "Good?" Ethan smiled. "Yes, good means—" "Right safe," the cub tried to mimic the word again, mouth clumsy around the syllables. "Good," he laughed softly. "Close enough." The middle cub crawled onto his lap, curling up like a cat. Its heavy breathing slowed as it drifted to sleep. Ethan stroked its fur absently, lost in thought. He remembered the jungles of Wraith, the storms, the fire, the long nights of fear. He had been alone, half mad, ready to die, and somehow this had come out of it. 3 lives that the galaxy wanted erased. He looked at them and whispered, "You shouldn't even be alive." But maybe that's the point. The council's debate hours later, the council met again behind sealed doors. No cameras. No witnesses. "They obeyed him," said the Seraphin representative. "That cannot be ignored." "They obey because he's infected them," argued another. "Human compassion is a disease. It spreads." The high speaker frowned. "Perhaps not a disease, perhaps an adaptation." The Draxer slammed his tail. "An adaptation that will destroy us. Imagine if predator species across the galaxy begin bonding with humans. What happens to the balance? Who becomes prey then?" Silence followed. The speaker spoke again, slowly. "So what do you propose?" The Draxer's eyes glowed like burning coals. "We end it quietly before dawn, the night before the attack." In the observation room, Ethan woke with a start. The smallest cub whimpered in its sleep, claws twitching. He reached over, soothing it. The lights were dimmed, and beyond the glass walls, Sirath's moons shone like twin eyes. He didn't know that in the shadows of the lower corridors, armed soldiers were already moving, members of the preservation block. Their orders were clear: eliminate the cubs, erase the evidence, silence the human. Inside, Ethan spoke softly to the cubs, unaware of the danger coming. "Tomorrow, they'll ask more questions," he said, "and you'll have to be brave again." The eldest blinked up at him. "Brave? It means not letting fear control you." The cubs stared, confused but listening. Ethan smiled. "You'll understand one day." Suddenly the lights flickered. The hum of the room changed. Ethan's instincts kicked in instantly. He stood. "Something's wrong." The eldest cub growled, a warning. The youngest pressed close to his leg. Then came the sound. Soft footsteps. Too many, too careful. The intruders. The door hissed open. 6 soldiers in black armor stormed in, weapons raised. "Stand back, human," one shouted. "By order of the council, these creatures are to be terminated." Ethan stepped forward, blocking their aim. The council gave no such order. "Orders came from above," the soldier growled. "Move aside." The cubs growled low, fur rising like fire. Ethan spread his arms. "You'll have to go through me." The soldier hesitated. "You'd die for them?" Ethan's eyes hardened. "I already did, once." A tense second passed. Then one of the soldiers fired. The blast missed, scorching the wall, but that was enough. The eldest cub roared, leaping forward with impossible speed. Another aimed, but Ethan shouted, "Stop!" And they did. The cub froze mid-lunge, trembling, eyes wild. Ethan knelt, his voice calm, gentle. "It's okay. Don't be what they expect." The cub shuddered and lowered its claws. The soldiers stared, stunned. The human had just stopped a predator's attack with words. Before anyone could move again, alarms blared. The council guard arrived, weapons drawn. "Drop your arms," a voice commanded. "You're under arrest for unauthorized operation." The traitors hesitated, then surrendered. Ethan stood, breathing hard, hand still resting on the cub's shoulder.
"You see?"
he whispered. "Even fear listens to reason, if you speak the right way." The aftermath: by morning, the attack had become public. Footage leaked to every network, soldiers trying to kill children, and a human shielding them with his body. The galaxy was outraged. Some demanded justice for Ethan, others accused him of manipulating sympathy. But one truth was now undeniable. Every test, every threat, every act of violence only proved his bond with the cubs stronger. Even the high speaker, who had doubted him, began to question everything she believed. She stood before the council and said softly, "Perhaps fear has ruled us too long." The turning point: later that day, she visited the observation chamber. Ethan was sitting near the window, the cubs sleeping around him like living shadows. "You've caused quite a storm," she said. He looked up. Storms clear the sky sometimes. She studied him. You could have let them die. No one would have blamed you. I would have, he said quietly. She glanced at the cubs. Do you think this peace will last? Ethan smiled faintly. Peace isn't a thing you find. It's something you keep teaching. The speaker was silent for a long time. Then she turned to leave. Tomorrow, she said, the council votes. Whatever happens, know this, you've already changed us. When she was gone, Ethan looked at the cubs and whispered, let's hope it's for the better. Outside, the twin moons of Zyrath glowed brighter than ever, as if the universe itself was holding its breath, watching a human and 3 predator children defy the oldest rule of life. Predators were never meant to sit beside prey.